All right, this is the instructions for Lab 4 in the Geography of Beer and Wine for at least this semester of spring of 2025. We'll see how it goes. So the objective of this lab is to do spatial analysis, to look at a hypothetical situation and then make a determination about what kind of business would be most successful where. And because of that focus of this class, what we're looking at are two different kinds of businesses. One is craft breweries. So these are small, oftentimes family-owned operations, but certainly not breweries that are, in many cases, not making a lot of their money from distribution, but a lot of it is from direct-to-consumer sales, either through tap rooms or occasionally through other retailers, like other restaurants or bars. But they're selling a lot of this face-to-face. So that's one data set that we're going to look at. The other is a category of restaurants that within the marketing industry they call like restaurant-tainment. But the colloquial term that has emerged for them is what's called breastaurants. This is sort of most stereotypically restaurant chains like Hooters or Twin Peaks, in which, regardless of your thoughts on the food, the part of the appeal for the restaurant is meant to be the attire that the almost entirely female waitresses wear. And these two kinds of businesses, breweries and this particular class of restaurant, have seen tremendous growth over the last, realistically, 20 years. As I'm recording this, the Hooters chain, I believe, has actually filed for bankruptcy. So perhaps we're seeing the end of maybe that particular chain, although as we'll see in the data, there isn't a lot of evidence that the trend in terms of restaurant entertainment and uniform-based entertainment is going away. In fact, it may be the case that the Hooters chain, which sort of invented this subgenre of restaurant entertainment, has just been passed by its competitors at this point, because there's a lot of different brands and franchises at this point doing similar kinds of things. So the map that we're going to make is going to let us look at 4 hypothetical investment locations. So places where if we are restaurant or real estate investors, we might put one of these two kinds of businesses, either a new craft brewery with a tap room serving direct to customers, or one of these entertainment restaurants that focuses on women in slightly revealing or extremely revealing clothing, depending on the chain, and determining which of these locations of the 4 would be most successful or likely to be most successful based on its locational characteristics for that particular kind of purpose. And without giving too much away, these kinds of businesses do not follow the same locational strategies. Their customer bases are quite different. So we would expect that you wouldn't make the same recommendation for one as you would for another. There's going to be 4 total data sets that we're going to have the opportunity to look at, put on the map, and format in different ways using ArcGIS Online, as has been the case in every mapping assignment completed for this class thus far. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started actually making this map now. And to do that, we sign into our account and we click on Map to get started. So I have set it up so that all of the layers you need are available through ArcGIS Online. So if you click Add under Add Layer, and then make this ArcGIS Online, you should be able to search for them, and I'll do these kind of in order. Hopefully that'll all work clearly. So the first layer we need is the actual points for those potential investment locations. So this one's called Potential Locations, Lab 4. And you can see there's actually 2 layers that we need that are part of this. So we can go ahead and add them both. We're going to symbolize them here in just a moment, but we do need both our points and our drive times. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to go ahead and get all of the data we need for the lab on the map. And then I'm going to format them so that it looks in a way that looks nice in a way that we want it to. So the next layer we're going to get is the breweries that we want to evaluate their locations. So that to do that we get brewery. Oh, sorry, it starts with DFW brewery. And that should just about do it. There we go. So DFW brewery locations 2025, Esri BA. The anecdote at the end there is telling us the data source, that these are actually from the business analyst tool within Esri's software that you can access through ArcGIS Online or actually through the business analyst web platform as well. Each of these locations is identified by searching for the basically government code that is applied to breweries. So you put in the number for breweries, search, and then Esri gives you back all the things that are classified by that code in there. And I will say it missed a couple breweries. So this isn't a perfect representation, and I went through and edited because some things that counted as breweries ended up being like distribution warehouses and those sorts of things. So you do have to be a little bit careful about how those classification codes work. But nonetheless, it's a great way to get this kind of data that is pretty reliable compared to many other sources, and particularly ones that, as long as you're at the university, you have access to for low cost. It doesn't cost much. The university pays something for it, but you wouldn't have to. So anyhow, we've added our brewery locations, and the last thing we need to add are the locations of those restaurants. And I just hate that term, but that is what they get called. So. And there it is, DFW Restaurants 2025. So we'll add that layer. And now we have all of the layers that we need listed here. Now, you'll note that all the point locations are symbolized identically. So they all look exactly the same, and that is not especially helpful because we can't tell the difference between any of them. So we are actually going to start by bringing the potential locations layer to the top. We can just click and drag to do that. I also want to bring my drive time buffers up as well. And we may reposition this later. We'll play it by ear as we go along. And because I want to make this as simple as possible, as I'm formatting each element, I'm actually going to turn them off. So if we hover over these, we can turn off their visibility. Now we're not removing them from the map entirely. We're just turning off their visibility so that we can see what they look like better. Now, I'm going to do something in this because of the way I like to work. I really, really like having a darker base map, but some of the analysis that we're going to want to do later may require that we change the base map back so that we can see more detail about highway locations, other kinds of infrastructure that might be of interest. But for now, I'm going to switch our base map, there we go, the base map tab, to dark gray canvas. And admittedly, this does change a little bit about how maybe I would choose to format some of these points, because if I want it to stand out on a black background, that's a different calculation potentially than it would be on a lighter colored one. So we'll play it by ear as we go along here. But I zoomed out so that you could see all 4 of the potential investment locations. We have one that is in Southwest Fort Worth, and I'll zoom in and have a look at that. It is just off of really where Interstate 20 and the Benbrook Highway intersect. It is west of the relatively new tollway that runs really to the south and to the west here from Fort Worth. The second location, if we click on this, we can see all of the data that's in here, and this is mostly just address location data. In fact, we probably want to format these pop-ups to really just be very simplistic, because we don't need almost any of that information. It's not going to help us make the choices about what we would invest in. But this is, for perspective, in what's sort of the near south side of Fort Worth. This is Berry Street, that's Interstate 35. TCU, Texas Christian University, where most of the students who'll be watching this attend. It's located right over here. Actually, extends even over there. And for some other sort of useful points of reference, potentially, Magnolia Avenue, which is a relatively well-known restaurant, corridor is here. South Main Street that extends into downtown Fort Worth is also right there. So this is not in that exact area, but it is along a major north-south thoroughfare called Hemp Hill Street, on sort of the edges of what we might call the near south side today. The third location is, again here, this is on Henderson Street in Dallas. Henderson Ave is this part of it anyway, is a commercial district. And we'll see some of the surrounding things that are around it. But it's a restaurant district similar to what you might find in the Magnolia Street area. And the last potential location is off of the North Dallas Tollway, right before you get to El Dorado Parkway in the rapidly expanding North Dallas suburbs, north of Frisco here. So this is really the edges of the suburban to rural fringe of North Dallas, the North Dallas metro area. Historically, Denton was sort of the northernmost node in the Dallas-Fort Worth triangle, and increasingly that triangle is becoming a polygon of some type, closer to a rectangle as North Dallas gets denser up through McKinney, increasingly even to Melissa, almost all the way to Oklahoma now. So anyhow, that's our 4 locations: 2 in Fort Worth, 1 in sort of central Dallas, 1 in far north Dallas. And these are the locations that we most need to look at. So we want to highlight them in a way that we can really tell what they look like. So we can click on them and open up their properties, and then click on Edit Layer Style to change what it's going to look like. Now, each of these has no other attributes that we can really use that are of any interest for, we're not going to be able to show size, like the value of the property or any of those sorts of things. That's not part of what we're trying to do here. So what we really want to do is say, like, do we really like these orange dots or not? And what would we like better? Right? So we can click there, click on Symbol Style, and it is, basic point. And so we can look at basic shapes and maybe squares or triangles. These could be things that are helpful for us. There's all sorts of other kinds of, say, less basic shapes that we could use. And I like the idea of using a star. So we'll go through and click that. And then we can change our fill color potentially. And let's say we want this to be able to stand out on probably not just a black background, so it's going to need to have something, but perhaps a slightly darker color. So maybe we just go with actually a darker purple, which in the short term isn't going to show up that well, but later on will probably look just fine. And for our outline color, we're going to go pure black. So in red, green, blue, this is 0, 0, 0 as the values, but that's what we're going to do. So black outline, and that will make it stand out better against those things. 20 pixel size, actually I think is probably okay. So we have formatted that, close it, done, done, and we get that effect. Next, we're going to format our drive time zones. So first I'll make them visible, and let's go in and look at one closely. So these drive times are calculated based on how long it would take you to drive, how far you could go driving from any of these point locations. And depending on traffic, access to highways and so on, the areas are going to be somewhat different. So we have 2 drive times, rings around each one. The first is a 5-minute drive, the second is a 10-minute drive. Now, it might be the case that for our restaurants, we expect that people might be willing to travel more than 10 minutes. So if that was the case and you were doing this professionally, you would want to consider other distance metrics or other relational distance measures like 15-minute drive time, 20-minute drive time, and depending on what you're selling, maybe people are going to be willing to travel even farther than that. You just have to see, you have to know your business in those cases. But when we look at this, there's a single symbol. They're partly transparent, overlaying on one another. What we want to be able to do, though, is at least know the difference between, in minutes, is 5 or 10 in this case. So there's only going to be 2 categories. And we want them to be done based on types. So we have these 2, 5, and 10 measures, but we can't actually see the one underneath because there's no transparency at all. So we're going to need to change that. And red and blue are fine colors. We could go through and change the symbols specifically. So if we want something a little bit different, we could go about doing that. I actually think red and blue should work pretty well for this. Actually, as I'm thinking about this right now, what I really want is going to be grayscale. So we're going to make the inner layer of the 5-minute one sort of medium gray color. 9491. Anyway, the outline color we're going to switch to being black. Outline transparency is fine. Art fill transparency we're going to set to, we'll see what this looks like when we get done, but I think we're going to want it at about 30%. And it's impossible to tell right now because I've done this in sort of reverse order where we're formatting something we can't see yet. But when we change this symbol, we make this fill color an even lighter gray. The outline color is going to be black, and then we make the fill transparency for this one 60%. Now we can see both layers much more effectively. And for what it's worth, the reason I changed from using colors in this case to the grayscale is, one, we're not going to have a grayscale base map in the end, but also we're going to use color to differentiate between the different kinds of or the franchises within the restaurant layer. And we don't want to have a bunch of different competing colors, especially if they get overlaid by something that has color in it. So we're going to just keep this as simple as possible so that we can use the color scheme for that layer, the other layer, from a brand standpoint. All right. I hope that's clear. So let's zoom back out, have a look where we're at right now. And I keep talking about these base map differences, so even though I liked it better, we're going to go back to our basic topographic map. And look, now I can tell for sure the formatting I used is not going to be good enough for that. So we got to go back to the drive time layers. There we go. Style options, and we just got to make them darker. So in this case, we'll go down to, we don't want it to be fully black, but a dark gray. Keep the transparency the way it is. And for this one, we do the same, but we don't go as dark. And now, that's a little better, right? We can see it a little more clearly. That's fine. All right, so next up, I'm actually going to do the brewery locations because this is the simpler of the two. Turn this on. And at this point, we could just leave these dots as they are. They're actually kind of nice the way that they get formatted. We've got this sort of little radiance to them as well. But for the sake of practicing, we could pick other things that we want to do. It is currently set as a single symbol, which is this. but we can still format that if we want. Oh, I'm back in the drive time buffers. That's not the one we need. Oh, I just did. That was not good. All right. Wow. All right. Well, redoing that because even professors make these kinds of mistakes. But fix it all right. Okay, now we come here, single symbol, location, symbol style, there's a point. We don't want basic points, we want something fun. So let's look at this. And let's say points of interest. We might be able to look at these and see something that sort of makes sense. When you're making your own maps, you can also sort of make custom choices that might go beyond what sort of the default things that are available in ArcGIS Online are. I actually don't like any of those, so let's see what else we got. We're definitely not going to do so they have a thing for bars, but that a martini glass actually isn't that intuitive for what a brewery sells, so I don't think that's a good choice either. So let's go back to shapes, and let's say, don't like those either. All right, we might come back and change that as well, but for now, that's fine. Now, one sort of note here is that I haven't decided to, and look how many breweries there are in the metro area of Dallas-Fort Worth is pretty large, and that's an error because Durant's not part of there, but it's all right. We'll focus on this area anyway. But I haven't decided to change the coloration based on say like the brand name or the name of the brewery, because there really aren't any duplicates. They're all unique values. So we get a whole bunch of different colors, but it wouldn't tell us very much about the data itself. That isn't as true when we look at the restaurants layer. I'm going to turn the breweries off really quickly, turn the restaurants on, and then we're going to look at this. And we're going to use co-name, which is company name. And as it happens, there's so many types that a bunch of these are being displayed as gray dots at the end because they only have one location. So the main thing that we really want to make sure is that for the chains that have the most locations, that we are giving them unique colors that we can identify. I thought I had taken this out, so all right, well, that's the only error that's in there, and we'll figure it out later. Suffice to say, when I'm looking at this now, the colors are noticeable, but they don't really stand out maybe as much as I would like. But I think I want to adjust that with size rather than by changing these colors. You can pick a different kind of color ramp if you want. So in this case, high brightness might help a bit. Actually, I do think that is a little better. So maybe we do that and size. Okay, so each of these different color ramps, and when you hover over them, you can see names of the colors, giving us potentially sort of like theme ideas about what you might do with those colors or what kinds of scenes they might evoke. Mushroom soup doesn't sound especially appealing. Don't know why there'd be bright blue in a mushroom soup either, but you get the gist. Sunset fade, that sounds lovely. All right, so here's our points. Here's the size though, down to 6. So we had 20 as the size for our potential locations. Let's turn off the automatic size adjustment and set this to 20. And now those points are really visible. The argument against the increased size, just for those of us that are really nerding out on this today, is that if you have a lot of points close together, they get stacked on top of each other, and you lose locational accuracy. For the sake of what we're doing here, I think it's okay to just leave it as is, though. Okay? Because realistically, what we're creating here is a tool for an investment purpose, not something that necessarily has to be aesthetically gorgeous, right? So I can already tell I don't think that the potential locations layer, that color is bright enough. So I'm going to go back and quickly update this symbol style, change that color to something just brighter. And look, when I pause, if you look at the actual map, you can see what it's doing in terms of color. And realistically, actually, I just don't think, what I think I need to do is make this, let's see, I'm going to get into the bright greens instead. There we go. And so they're stars, so we know they're different from the circles that might have a similar kind of color. But now they're really visible, and that's a lot more helpful. So this is the basics of the map that you're going to create. We could still play around with the base map if we think that there's a way that it might look a little bit better. But we're going to want to have some ability to sort of move around and look at points as well. So having that extra context is nice compared to this, because if we zoom in, we have pretty minimal labeling in that case, whereas when we go to topographic or streets, when you zoom in, you're getting a lot more descriptions of the neighborhood names, the road names, major points of interest, in those zones as well. So in all of those cases, I think we probably are happy with that layout. I like topographic better than streets, though. All right. The last thing I'm going to do is move the drive time buffer layer all the way to the bottom, because it's currently covering up some stuff, and we can still interact with those layers with the other layers being on top of them. So we turn back on our breweries, and we get a full picture of these two different industries. Now, what I'm going to do here is, to get credit for this lab, at this point, you're basically done with creating the map as you're required to do it. So what we're going to do is go to the save function, save as, call our map DFW, and DFW Breweries and Restaurant Analysis, tag it for beer and wine, TCU, whatever tags we want. All right. And in real life, your summary wouldn't be, this map was created by, and then your name for completion of Lab 4 in the Geography, Beer and Wine class at TCU. You'd want to say something more specific about what the map actually is, like comparing the locations of these restaurants versus breweries and so on. But for the purposes of this class, you can describe it this way. That helps me to know who made the map and those sorts of things too. So you save the map, and then to share what you've completed, you click share, you set the layer to everything, you click save, and then you copy this into your Lab 4. And you put your map link, and then you answer the questions that are part of the lab as detailed in the lab documents below. And you submit this whole Word, or you can save it as a PDF document, to the Lab 4 folder on D2L. So when you've done that, you're done, right? But answering the questions, some of the questions are going to ask you to understand clusters. Like, are there clusters of these particular types of restaurants or breweries, and are there clusters of like for brands in particular? Brands of those restaurants, right? So one of the ways that you can sort of explore this data is to create a duplicate layer on one. So this copy layer of breweries, and then click heat map. And you can change heat maps in terms of the area of influence, from smaller. Now each site is basically by itself, no influence on others, so you won't see hotspots, to much larger ones where everything sort of becomes one. So somewhere in this kind of zone is probably about right. You see a lot of these breweries are actually not especially clustered, but then there are a few places where they are. So you can explore that, and as you zoom in, again, the influence area will change as well. You can set it at a distance that you think is appropriate and then lock it. And now you've got that, and then you could turn that off and say, okay, that's the cluster that it's identified here. You turn it back on. Okay, that's a cluster zone there. Turn it off and have a look, and you can see this sort of corridor of quasi-industrial area between downtown Dallas and the Trinity River. And if you're wondering, yes, of course, you can do this again for that restaurants layer. In this case, we turn off that and we just go to heat map. So we take the attribute out, And you want to probably try to do this at the same scale and having your area of influence be comparable, right? So if I look at it this way and then let's say I lock the heat map here, I can see a spot way up here by Frisco. I can see a spot right here kind of in Irving, maybe a spot right here. And so when I go to explore what is in those locations, turn off that copy, and a few of these locations are actually kind of hard to see, but I can click on them to see. So a restaurant called Trophy Chest, which is next to Ojos Locos Sports Cantina. That means Crazy Eyes for those of you that don't speak Spanish. Wing House of Dallas, which doesn't maybe sound like an entertainment, and Longhorn Ice House as well. And there is a brewery in the general area as well, Four Corners Brewing. But so that's one way that you can look at that. In the analysis, I ask you to select, in fact, you're required to select each of these locations, select one of each of the 4 locations for either a restaurant or a new brewery location. So the last bit of this analysis that you're doing is actually to look at the demographic characteristics of the drive time buffers. And I'm now realizing we're going to have to do one more edit. No, that should still have worked. Why is that? Interesting. I want the 5-minute one to come up first, but when we click on it, it's showing me the 10-minute buffer, which is potentially helpful. So this has a variety of different kinds of demographic data that we can look at here. We have population counts, the percentage that is of particular racial groups, total households, as well as educational outcomes like the total number of people that have a college degree, the percentage of the population that has a college degree, and so on. So knowing what you know about potentially these kinds of businesses and the locations that we're looking at, you can use that demographic data to help predict which area would be a better fit for a particular kind of restaurant or brewery. So again, this is the 10-minute buffer for that Hemp Hill location. This is the 5-minute buffer around them. And so you can use that embedded demographic information to help you make your selections. So that's the challenge. The way you earn sort of full credit on the assignment is to do a really good job of explaining why one of these locations is better suited than another for the particular kind of business that you'd be looking for. And so you'll notice that none of the locations, the potential locations, really have the exact kind of business directly adjacent to them. There's some that are sort of in the drive times, but there aren't any that are right there. So the challenge, of course, is figuring out what could work in those zones given what you know about the rest of those sites. So that's the challenge set out for you in Lab 4. I look forward to reading your results and seeing all the ways you can create these maps, how you symbolize your points and all the rest. So thanks for your time, and I look forward to seeing it all.